for Tracy, let's hear it. There's always something awesome going on in Boston. I know.
What's going on?
Yeah.
Just working on a couple brokers. I think I got a broker coming on soon, and we just rolled out that'smytown.com, which we're excited about to help agents dominate their local market. So a lot of good things.
Yeah, you should talk about that for a second. Explain it.
So, many of you probably heard me talking about homes listed by the last year and a half. I built this website out with the hopes of like every agent in the country getting on board with putting their off-market stuff on the website, so we'd have a lot more listings in Zillow. So we've kind of transformed that into that'smytown.com, where we're going to help agents dominate their local market by really giving them the support structure they need to do that, with admin support and everything else, so that they can actually dominate their town and not have to figure out how to build web pages and how to, grow their Facebook presence and all that other stuff. We're going to help with all that and help them dominate their local market and, start to really build their network in town and bring in some advertising, or, with different local vendors and partners in the area that they can bring in advertising that they can put towards their business too, to help them grow.
Awesome.
That's the 1 minute speech.
You got your elevator pitch down. That's important. All right. Anybody else? Last one. Come on. One more. There's got to be, guys, there's got to be more good news. Come on.
Spring, give us your breakdown on your fast. I'm on day 3.
Yeah.
Yesterday was rough, but
yeah. So I did 90-hour water fast. I ended it yesterday.
Did you end it with like a Big Mac or something?
No. Well, A, I don't eat that way anyway, but B, I know, but B, that would kill your gut. Like if you go for that many days without
that's true.
eating. But I did it the first day. I just wanted to prove to myself that I could go 24 hours of having self-discipline. And then when I started doing a little bit of research on it, understanding how the body works, and after 24 hours, how you start to heal your insides, your cells and stuff, like your body's not trying to process the food and all the glycogen and all that stuff. I was like, I'm going to continue this. So 90 hours. It was awesome. Like, truthfully, I feel great. And I would tell you guys this, if there's a couple of things, like there's a lot of reasons I did it as well, of like, you got to prove to yourself that you can do hard things, because life isn't always going to be easy. So choose what it is that you want to do that's going to help you feel accomplished. And also they prove to yourself that you can do hard things. Forced suffering also helps when there's something that comes up that's hard. So you're like, no, I've been through this. So like many of you guys know that I was burned in a fire when I was in my early 20s. When there's something hard that comes up for me, like that I have to get gritty, or that's like, oh my gosh, is this really happening? Or even like when I climb my Everest events or whatever, I'm like, dude, I've been freaking burned in a fire. If I haven't been burned in a fire, I can do anything, right? And so I just challenge you guys, do some things that get you uncomfortable. And not eating anything and only drinking water is one of them. So try it.
Plus all the health
awesome
that go along with it too.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, today we're excited to kick things off. For those, if you're here and this is your first time joining us for Rocket Fuel, welcome. We're so happy that you're here. We do this every single Monday at 12 o'clock Eastern time. We've just been on a slight break from the holidays into the new year, but we're here pretty much through thick and thin all year long. So we love having you guys here. This mastermind is being run by our group at Real Broker. It's open to anybody in the entire industry, all agents at Real Brokers. So we're just super glad that you're here, and we hope that this will kick your week off. And your new year as well. And I'm excited about this conversation, Joe, because I know what you're going to talk about, because you and I talked about this for like 20-25 minutes before the holidays. So I'm going to give it over to you.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to take the next 15 or 20 minutes, share with you guys some things. And then we really want any questions, any other issues you have, even unrelated to this. We're going to go for the next 52 minutes. We encourage you to stay on as long as you can. But when I'm done, if you have any questions about what I've talked about or about anything you're dealing with, now is the time to ask those questions so that Spring, Amy, and myself, and any of you others can answer and really help each other. What I'm going to talk about is born out of my love for mathematics. I'm kind of on the fence whether or not we ever actually got to the moon. Some of you know what I'm talking about. Like, there's some pretty convincing, Anthony, don't laugh, bro. There's some pretty convincing stuff that says we never got to the moon. However, assuming we did get to the moon, it was math that actually did it. They proved mathematically that we could do it before we ever actually did it. My wife and I have been married, I would say happily. She would say we've made it for the last 22 years. When we first got married, I told her, like, being married to me is probably never going to be it's probably never going to be a super steady marriage. Like, I'll be all over the place, but the one thing I will always be with you is honest. And I've always given her personal honesty, and I've always requested from her personal honesty. And to be honest with you guys, I think that's why we have a successful marriage. I tell her the good, the bad, and the ugly. She does the same with me, and then we just work through it. We've raised 4 kids. I think we're doing a pretty good job. I think we have a pretty happy marriage, but I could not say the same had our marriage not been based on honesty. Well, when I then apply that to our businesses, I realize so many of us aren't honest with ourselves as entrepreneurs. We're not honest with the industry. And if we're running teams, we're not honest with our teams, and our teams aren't overly honest with us as leaders. And so what I'm going to share with you revolves around 100% personal honesty. Like, you've got to be really, really honest with yourself in order for any of this to make sense. So let's start with this. Pull out your phone, grab a piece of paper, whatever it is, and just write down, I don't need to know what it is, but you need to know what your production goal is for 2024. The production goal is easiest to, like, it's easiest to just pick a number of units you want to close in 2024. I'm okay if you write down your team goal, if you're a team leader, but if you are in production, this goal should just be a sheer number of units you want to sell in 2024. If you don't know, then you are Alice in Wonderland and I am the Cheshire Cat. If any of you have seen Alice in Wonderland, you know there's that moment when Alice is lost in the wilderness and she goes to the Cheshire Cat and says, help me, I'm lost, I don't know where I'm going. If you don't have a goal for production, you are Alice. Not having that goal is you being lost. Me being the Cheshire Cat says, well, you need to have a goal. And you being Alice says, well, I really don't know what it is. And then me being the Cheshire Cat says, well, if you don't have a goal, what does it matter where you go from here? If you don't have a goal for your production, then what does it matter what you do today? Show up, don't show up. Call your clients, don't call your clients. Circle prospect, don't circle prospect. Hold an open house, don't hold an open house. None of it matters if you don't have a goal. So my number one point that I'll tell you, so there's 5 I'm going to cover, really 6 if I add in personal honesty. Number 1 is have a goal for production for 2024. I'm going to completely reverse engineer and show you how you will or will not hit that goal based on mathematics. So the first thing is, let's assume your production goal is 25 units. 25 units, so we're all on the same page, is about 10 times the national average. You may go like 25 units. If I did 25 units, I'd go bankrupt. Well, you built yourself as an absolute killer that is 20 to 30 times as productive as the national average. But the national average for transaction sides in North America is 3 per year per agent. So if your goal is 25, you're 8 times the national average. Well, principle number 2 is how many face-to-face meetings it's required in order for you to hit your 25 unit goal or your 20 unit goal or your 30 unit goal or whatever it is. The way we get this number is we literally take the number of units we're going to do per year, and this is the first piece of math I need you to run, and you divide it by 0.2. The reason we divide it by 0.2 is 20% of the face-to-face meetings you have with individuals will turn into sales. Now, you could be worse than the national average and only close 10% of the people you meet face-to-face, or you could be better than the national average and you could close 30%, but the national average is 20%. So if I say 25 divided by 0.2, it'll tell me in order to reach my goal of 25 closings, I need to have 125 face-to-face meetings in 2024 in order to close 25 transactions. Now, these face-to-face meetings are with different individuals. You can't meet with the same person 37 times and count that as 37 face-to-face meetings. In order to close 25 units, I would need to have 125 face-to-face meetings. So if your goal is 30 units, then you divide that by 0.2, and 30 units represents 20% of like 140 face-to-face meetings, whatever it is. So now what you could easily do from there is you could divide that by 12, and that'll tell you you need to have 10 face-to-face meetings per month. You could divide that by 4, and that'll tell you you need to have 2 face-to-face meetings per week. That's how you eat an elephant in a very digestible way, is to say, if I want to close 25 units, what Joe's telling me is I only need to have 2 face-to-face meetings per week. I can do that. Now, number 3, so number 1 is number of units you're going to close in 2024. Number 2 is the number of face-to-face meetings that it requires. Let's talk about number 3. Number 3 is you take your number 2 annual goal and you times it by 2, or you divide it by 50%, either way, because only 50% of the face-to-face meetings you set will actually happen. So now the next thing you deal with is, if I said 125 face-to-face meetings need to happen, and I divide that by 0.5, I would need to have 250 appointments set to close 25 appointments. Or I'm sorry, to close 25 deals to have 125 appointments show up, because only 50% of your face-to-face meetings happen. So this is 50% of your listing appointments set. This is 50% of your buyers you plan on meeting at Starbucks or at a home. Only 50% of your human meetings that you set actually happen. Super discouraging, but super realistic. If you set 10 listing appointments in 6 months, you're probably going to have 5 listing appointments that happen. So how do these things fall apart? There's a million different ways. Hey, something came up. Can we push it to the next weekend? And that next weekend never happens. Hey, we decided not to sell. Hey, we actually already listed with somebody else. So 50% of the people that tell you to come and list their property or to talk to them about listing their property end up canceling their appointment. So Cameron asked, how did we get to 50? How did we get to 250? So it started with 25 closings. In order to have 25 closings, knowing that only 20% of my face-to-face meetings are going to convert, what I would do is I would take 25 and I would divide it by 0.2 by 20. And that 20% would turn into 125 meetings that happen face-to-face. And knowing that only 50% of face-to-face appointments set actually take place, then I would take 125 and times it by 2 or divide it by 0.5 to get to 250. So 250 would represent the number of appointments I would need to set in order to meet 125 people face-to-face. Well, here's where the elephant gets significantly larger. Principle number 4 is number of conversations I would need to have about real estate in order to set an appointment. So what I would do is I would take my 250 and I would divide it by 0.05, which represents 5% of my conversations that I have about real estate turn into actual appointments set. So in order to set 250 appointments on a national average, I would have to have 5,000 conversations about real estate. So those 5,000 conversations, a huge elephant. I can divide that by 12 to make it a little bit more digestible and say, well, I would have 416 per month. And then I could divide that by 20, which is number of working days that I would realistically have. And that would give me 20 conversations on a daily basis. So what's interesting to me about all of this math is principle number 5 is conversations need to have on a daily basis. If I'm willing to commit to 20 conversations per day, math tells me that I will end up with somewhere between 20 and 25 transactions per year. Now, all of this gives us the ability to triage. So let me just put some math in the chat for you. So if I say 25 closing goal, and if I say I'm willing to, or I'm going to meet 125 people face to face, but in order for me to get 125 people face to face, it's going to take me 300 appointments set. What that tells me is if the national average is 50% and you're only getting 40%, you are setting some appointments that aren't real appointments. Like people are basically setting appointments with you just to get off the phone. If you're the type of person who says, well, Joe, what's crazy is I end up closing 50% of appointments met, I would tell you, you're not setting enough appointments. You're pre-qualling the people too much before you set an appointment with them. Like you're only meeting like for sure appointments. So the best part about this is as a leader, if you know these 5 numbers, then you could triage any agent in your team to figure out where their weakness is. So if somebody's like, okay, my goal is 20 units a year, which means I need to have 100 appointments met, which means I need to set 200 appointments, but it takes me, rather than 4,000 conversations, it takes me like 10,000 conversations to get to 200 appointments. I'm only setting like 2% of the appointments of the conversations I have turn into appointment. I would say you're pretty weak in your conversational dialogue, that you're just not doing a good enough job in your conversation, pushing it to appointments. But if you're the type of person who's like, yeah, in 1,000 conversations, I set 100 appointments, you're so extraordinary at appointment setting, I would tell you, you need to have more conversations. Because if 1,000 conversations turn into 100 appointments for you, i.e. twice the national average, imagine what would happen if we had 2,000 conversations. Now, every agent is going to have their strength and weakness, but to just run through this math for you very simply again, and then we'll kind of open it up to Q&As. What you need to make sure is that you understand what your annual production goal is. And then you need to make sure you reverse engineer the math, not necessarily so that you know like the number of appointments met, but the issue you really need to focus on is the number of conversations on a daily basis, and make sure that that number pretty close to matches your annual production goal. So if your goal is 40 units a year, understand you probably need to be having close to 40 conversations related to real estate a day. If you're not willing to have 40 conversations related to real estate a day, mathematically speaking, it's going to be really, really hard for you to close 40 units. Now, two things. Number one, there's always outliers. Like there's always that agent that somehow is able to turn 30 units out of 10 conversations a day. That agent probably has a really unfair competitive advantage, meaning their significant other runs the school board in their local market and they get 10 teachers a month that need to buy houses, or the culinary union, or like in Vegas, you know, the hotel. If your significant other is the CEO of MGM and MGM has a home purchase product that if they buy a home with you, MGM puts down their down payment for them or something, you have a crazy unfair advantage. But if you're a little bit like me and life hasn't given you a ton of advantages, then you're going to have to reverse engineer the math. Number two, I believe that the math shows us that if I'm willing to have a certain number of conversations, that will yield a certain number of deals per year. Now, if I'm honest with myself, I would make sure that I don't set an annual goal that exceeds my willingness to have daily conversations. So if I'm willing to have 20 conversations a day, then I can close 20 units a year. But it would be illogical for me to set a 30 unit a year closing goal and only have 5 conversations a day. My closing percentage would have to be through the roof. My appointment set percentage would have to be through the roof. And my appointment met percentage would have to be through the roof in order for 5 conversations a day to yield 30 closings per year. All right, so I've thrown a ton of math at you guys. We are putting a cheat sheet on my Instagram that basically lists these 6 things and the math that goes behind them. So if you comment on Instagram, it'll get sent to you automatically. But having said that, let's open it up to questions. There may be a few in the chat that I can kind of clarify some of this for you. So Angie says, if an agent is having 100 conversations a week and not setting an appointment or sending anyone to the lender, how do you triage that? Love that, Ange. So in Angie's theoretical hypothesis, an agent's having 20 conversations a day, or in other words, 100 conversations per week, but they're not setting any appointments or sending anybody to the lender. Then that is a situation where we've run into that the agent needs to improve their conversational skills. Mm-hmm. So if I'm having a ton of conversations, but none of them are ending up in appointments set or being sent to the lender, then the reality is it's one of two things. Either A, what I'm saying is not sufficient to create the opportunity, or B, I'm having conversations that I'm hoping don't set appointments. So Spring, you've seen this in your office where an agent is just calling, but you listen to them and it sounds a little bit like this. Like, hey, this is Joe with the Joe Taylor Group or this is Joe from the Facebook team. You requested some information about a property that we have. Oh, okay. Yeah, no problem. Well, hey, listen, if you ever need me, this is my phone number. Please call me back. Okay, have a great day. And they hang up. Like the agent's so excited to just get off the phone. A, because they can tell Justin, like, hey, I had conversations. But B, they really don't want those conversations to lead anywhere because they're afraid, like, holy crap, if this person actually sets an appointment with me, I don't know what I'm doing at that appointment. Or B, if it turns into they want to write an offer, I don't know how to write an offer. So it's like they're fulfilling their responsibility of conversation, but you could tell really quickly that they're not being persistent enough for that conversation to turn into anything. Have you seen that before, Spring?
Yeah, sorry guys. It's a holiday, so my kids don't have school. So they're like, take me to the ski bus. So I'm going to switch to my phone here. But yes, I mean, the thing about it is if somebody's having a lot of conversations, but they're not getting the results, they're either not saying the right thing or they're not asking for the business. So oftentimes we call that the friendly helper. is that they're just doing the activities to do the activities, not because, and they want the results, they just don't know how to ask for the business. I dropped in the chat here. I think the key to everything you said, Joe, like I'm such a big numbers person, we know with Sisu, like the calculators, all of that. But the true key component to all of this is, are you going to be honest with yourself and actually do the work? Because it's one thing to know what you need to do, and then it's the second thing to actually do it. And I would challenge you all, track your numbers like crazy, because when you do start tracking it, then you'll know, well, where's the disconnect? Am I saying the wrong thing? Am I meeting with these people and that they're not converting? Okay, so what am I saying on the appointment? Okay, I'm not getting enough appointments. Or, I mean, we see it on all levels of all of our agents. Some of them have a lot of conversations. Some of them can set appointments. Some of them are met, whatever it is, but find out where that conversion ratio in your business can be tweaked, and it's a game changer.
Well, I love that, Spring. So here's the truth, guys.
I'm hopping
Justin,
off.
okay,
Okay,
no problem.
sorry.
So Amy, Justin, Spring, whatever. If I go to a doctor and I'm not honest with them about my symptoms, how on earth are they supposed to help me be healed? Like, that's just, I know that sounds almost insultingly simple, but it really is that simple. Like, if I am going to a doctor and I'm like, hey, I don't feel good, and they're like, well, what's wrong? And I've been throwing up for 3 days, but I don't tell them that. I'm like, I don't know, I just feel a little off. How on earth is that doctor ever supposed to help? So if you're a part of a team or you have a coach and you're not honest with your numbers, how is that team leader or coach supposed to really help you? And the inverse is true as well. Like, if you lead a team or you're coaching or mentoring agents and you don't know their actual numbers, how on earth are you ever supposed to help them? And so the triage is what I love the most about this. You can triage yourself and you can go, wait a minute, the number of conversations I have are supposed to turn into 5% appointments. And of those appointments, 50% of them are supposed to happen. And of the ones that happen, I'm supposed to close 20% of them. You can triage yourself and just say, where am I weak? Like, does it take me, am I turning 2% of my conversations into appointments? Or are only 10% of my appointments actually showing up? Or have I met with 20 people and not put a single deal together? You can triage yourself all along the way. And then the other component to this is having somebody you trust. Like, the reason why a doctor is good is because me as the patient trust them. So having somebody I trust take a look at my business and being honest with me, absolutely essential, Amy, in this process. Because if you're my mentor or team lead and I go to you and I go, listen, I know my goal is 25, but I'm only getting around to about 8 conversations per day, then your triage becomes very simple. Joe, are we going to modify your closing goal, or are we going to help you have more conversations? Because only one of those two things can be true. Am I right, Aim?
Once I heard a coach in the industry say that the number one thing that she does every single day, and she keeps this in her calendar, and it's something that I've done ever since, is to is to put in your calendar as a reminder and ask yourself, where is my money? Where is my money? And I think oftentimes we diminish the fact that we got into this business first and foremost for time and financial freedom. So if we get so hung up on, now, believe me, I'm obsessed with this. Like, when Joe told me about it, I love it. There's so much power, and clarity is power. We know that there's so much power in the numbers. However, what happens often is that we look at like contacts, conversations to get to appointments, etc. And we start, like, to the question somebody's asking about the dialer, and we just get into this like motion of like dials, calls. The whole point is to move contacts into conversations and conversations into appointments and appointments into transactions. That is literally our job. So when you ask yourself in the morning, where's my money? Who are the people that I've had like the lowest hanging fruit conversations so I could get them into an appointment, or where's the new opportunity going to come from? But the piece that I think that gets missed in our business, and I've been in sales now for 10 years and has been hammered in every coaching program, every brokerage, it doesn't matter where you are. It's like contacts. And then we just do that. We just pick up the phone and we just talk and have conversations for the sake of talking and having conversations. Go into every single phone call with the intention of booking an appointment. Get the appointment, go for the appointment, find out their motivation, find out what their status is from an approval perspective, find out their wish list, like actually ask the right questions that are going to determine whether or not you can get to an appointment, and go into every single call. But I think that we've been so programmed on the contact side, and none of this is wrong, but what I just want to encourage you is, like, once you know what that number is, then be very, very intentional about going for the appointments. So
Yeah, so I love that, Aim. So the question is, what do you count as a conversation? So
yeah,
we've got agents, we've got agents in our world that are just really good dialers. Like Angie Lauer is probably the best. She's the best I've ever seen, because she loves the grind. Like, she celebrates the close, but she really loves the conversation. So Angie does a lot of triple dialing. She does a lot of texting her database. What do I count as a real estate conversation? Well, if you dial your database and someone picks up and tells you to go F yourself, that's a conversation. If you circle prospect, so some triple dialers, you could just draw a map around a listing and you could call everyone that has a cell phone in that geographic area. Each one of those counts as a conversation. If someone shows up at an open house, I hate to tell you this, the 10 people that show up there do not count for sake of conversion as appointments met. They count as conversations. If you sit at a new home sales center and the sales agent is your buddy and you get to talk to everyone as they come in about potentially listing their home, that is not an appointment, that's a conversation. So anything you do in which you have a verbal conversation, either live or on the phone, with someone related to real estate is a conversation. An appointment is you have that conversation, and let's say you're circle prospecting. Hey, this is Joe. I just listed a property in your neighborhood. I'm doing previews with the neighbors so that they can see the home before anybody else, and that way they can point it out to their friends or whatever, right? If you say, will you meet me there at 1 o'clock? I have a 1:15 and I have a 12:45. I want you to be my 1 o'clock. And they say yes. And they show up and they meet you at that property. That is an appointment. If you call somebody and you say, hey, I'm offering free desktop appraisals on people's homes. All I need to do is come look at your property and take 10 pictures, and I could predict within 99% accuracy how much your home is worth. Oh yeah, come take a look at it. That is an appointment. The conversation is the person either saying yes, no, or go screw yourself. The appointment is when you actually meet with them face to face. And so I don't care.
We monitor it slightly different than that, but I was just going to say is that one's not right or wrong. You just have to set what your metrics are going to be, and then you have to follow through on them. And then, like Spring said, be honest with yourself. So for us, until we've had a minimum of 60 to 120 minutes of a conversation, like where you've kept them on the phone, that classifies as a conversation. If somebody's like
60 minutes,
60 seconds, sorry, 60 seconds.
Oh, I was going to say, holy crap.
Where they didn't just say go screw yourself and then hang up the phone. So we would consider that a contact, but not a conversation. But again, to my point, one's not right, one's not wrong. You just have to set your metrics, and know your numbers, and then be honest with yourself about it. That's the bottom line.
A couple of words of caution, I would say. If any of these things are true, you're technically doing it wrong. And this is just the gospel according to Joe. Like, take it for what it's worth. If you close 75% of the people you meet face to face, you're doing it wrong. Not because you're not a great closer, but because you're just not meeting enough people face to face. You're leaving deals on the table because you pre-approve your appointments so much that you don't meet with somebody until they're so pre-approved that yes, you're closing 75%, but I would love to see you get that closing ratio down because you take more shots.
Mhm.
If 90% of your appointments actually happen, that's not a good thing. You want half of your appointments to fall through because you're taking some shots. People like, I've always been annoyed by the, like, you're not getting in my car until you're pre-approved and yada, yada. I'm like, well, that's good. But what about those people like me who would be like, Aim, I'm never getting pre-approved until I see a house I want. Like, I don't want to run my credit. I don't want to yada, yada. I've got good credit. I know it, right? Like, you got to take some shots on people.
Yeah.
If dialing, if you get 100% pickup rate on the people you're calling that turn into a conversation, you're just not dialing enough. So it's like, you could be better than any of these numbers I've given you, but if you're so much better that it's like, oh, that's crazy, 90% of my appointments show up. You're not setting enough appointments. Oh, that's crazy. Joe said 20% is the national average of conversion. I convert 70% of the people I meet with. You're not meeting with enough people. So it's like, be better than the numbers. I'm okay with it. But if you're like 6x better than the national average at something, chances are you're just not doing enough of that thing in order to have the averages play out for you. Does that make sense, guys? Or do I just sound like a maniac?
No, I think
Makes sense?
it's awesome. Matt saying, when you say conversations, is that referring to phone only? Everybody's going to vary on this. We just had this exact conversation this morning during our accountability groups with our own team. You can have conversations over text, you can have conversations over DM, and you can have conversations over email and over the phone. But if you start hiding behind any of those tech-based things, then that's where the issue lies. Like, when somebody opens your emails, call them. Don't just reply to their email, just pick up the phone and call them. They're obviously engaged. There's an aspect of motivation there. Now, you'll also have to be aware of like the demographic of who you're talking to as well. So if you can get further along in the process by communicating over text or over DM, but again, track your numbers, because are you getting them into an appointment? Then are they actually showing up? So I don't think that there's a cut and dry answer to it, but I would certainly be, and remember too, they have to be new people, new conversations, but just don't hide behind technology. Get on the phones. We're in a sales-based, relationship-based people business. You have to be able to talk to people.
So your numbers won't lie. Like on our team, I'll tell you, we don't count a reply to a text message as a conversation. The reply to the text message, so we would triage it like this. We'd say, hey, send 100 text messages, but if you get 40 replies, you can't say, oh, I had 40 conversations today.
And
if you're 40 replies,
just to clarify, we don't either, unless you get them engaged in a real estate conversation. That's all.
Right. If it then turns into, hey, let me call you really quick, it'd be simpler. Like, so we would then be adding in a second metric. So like, we're on Brivity, and Brivity counts text messages sent. Like, to me, I don't really care about that. Like, I would count text messages sent the same way I would count number of open house signs placed. Like, it all is driven to then have a conversation. But to Amy's point, create your own metrics, work it backwards. Say, okay, I gotta close 20 deals. In order to close 20 deals, I'm comfortable with a 20% closing ratio. So in order to have 20 deals, I need to meet with 100 individuals, not 10 individuals 10 times. I need to meet with 100 different human beings. Okay, well, now here's where I deviate, because in order to get 100 face-to-face meetings, it seems like 1 out of 3 shows up. So now to have 100 face-to-face meetings, I actually have to set 300, because I'm not, for some reason, my appointments just fall through at a greater rate than everybody else. So now you're editing the numbers to be personally honest to yourself. So last thing I'll kind of say on this, and then any other questions, and then we'll kind of tease some stuff coming up. Why do I love golf? I love golf because it is the most integrity-based game in the world. Like, I know if I moved my ball. I know if I hit 2 shots when no one was watching. Like, the only truth that exists in the game of golf is personal truth and integrity. Like, I can take mulligans, I can cheat and nobody would ever know, and the only person that would know is myself. Guys, Amy, myself, we're not going to be tracking your numbers. So you could look at all this and you could call BS on it. You could shoot a text over to us and go, I don't know what's going on, but like, I'm having my 30 conversations a day and none of them are turning into appointments. We can either fix it or you could stop lying to yourself and to us, right? And stop counting things that aren't real conversations. What I know is I can be slightly better than the national average, but it's going to be impossible for me to be 4 times as good at the national average at something and not be also weaker in other things. So it would be impossible for me to say, what's crazy is I have 20 conversations a day and I closed 100 units. Like, think about that math. In order for me to have 20 conversations that lead to 100 closed units, of those 20 conversations, which is 100 a week, which is 400 a month, I would need to have 25% of my conversations turn into appointments. And of those appointments, I would need 100% of them to show up. And of the 100% of them that show up, I would need like 60% of them that turn into closings in order for me to turn 20 conversations into 100 appointments. Like, even the great Angie Lauer doesn't see that type of numbers. So do yourself a favor, take the next couple of weeks and just be brutally honest with your numbers and then watch them bear out. And the last thing I'll tell you is, it is the 15th of the month. Look back at the first 15 days of the month and average out how many conversations you've had, not overall 15 days, but there's probably been about 10 working days. So how many conversations are you averaging in those 10 working days? And that will tell you what you're on pace to close in 2024. I hope that number scares you, because if you look at it and go like, dude, in 10 working days, I had about 50 conversations with different individuals. You're on track to close about 5 or 6 deals this year. So hopefully that motivates you to really step it up and really start to have conversations around real estate. And if you need to have more open houses, if you need to run more ads, if you need to get yourself a triple dialer, whatever you need to do to up your conversations, to up your closings. I just don't want there to be surprise in December of 2024 when you're like, dude, I don't know what happened this year. I closed 14 transactions. My bet is, if we reverse engineer it, your 14 transactions would have come from 10 to 14 conversations per day. Let me just show you this really quick, Aim, and then we'll go on to, if any of this math was fuzzy for you, comment on this Instagram post we put. Adriana linked it to the graphic that gives you all the math, again, for you to reverse engineer. But ultimately, what I want to gamify this a little bit with you guys is, over the year, I would love for you to hit me up and say, hey, here's my numbers. Can you triage me? I can triage you really, really quick if you give me honest numbers. Use me, use Amy, use your team leader, use your broker, whatever it is, because the math just doesn't lie around these things. If you're honest with yourself in the math, you'll be able to figure out where your weakness is really, really quick. And I would say that probably is the biggest gift of all this, is if you're honest in the math, you'll know really quickly where your weakness lies.
Good
That's
stuff.
all I got, Aim.
Oh, it's great.
That's all I got.
So good. Drop in the chat, you guys, if this was helpful for you, if you are going to, and then you also need to drop on comment on Joe's post too, so that you can get the actual form. If this resonated for you, just drop in the chat that you're going to be implementing it, that you're working on your numbers, just so we can get your feedback. This was valuable.
So let's talk about this outlier here.
Yeah.
So Dean Linnell he says he's been able to do 30 to 40 personal transactions with 3 to 5 conversations a day.
I was going to bring that up.
What? Yeah, why is that possible? Well, it's possible for 2 reasons. Number one, Dean is a staple in his local real estate market in the Vancouver, Canada area. Number 2, Dean is the most consistent sender of things like the Friday morning coffee. He sends an email out every Friday that keeps him top of mind with his clients. Dean, how long have you been doing that email for? Friday morning coffee? You're muted.
No, I think something was wrong with his mic because he's not muted. Yeah, we can't
Okay.
hear.
So anyways, I know I've been getting Dean's Friday morning coffee for probably 8 years.
Yeah.
So Dean does some extraordinary things. Now I'll tell you, these numbers start to lean to your favor the longer you are in the industry.
For sure.
Because things like repeat and referral business happen, like when you get a referral, when one of your clients calls and says, hey, my sister's moving to the market or moving to our area and she needs to buy a house, the conversion ratio on that's like 80%. So like the longer you're in the business, the more these numbers begin to skew towards you. So if you're a 30 unit a year producer, you could probably look at this and go, well, I've been doing 30 units a year with like 8 conversations a day. Well, it's because you've been in this business for so long that you built a repeat and referral business that absolutely crushes it. But again, for somebody like Dean, because the numbers skew so heavily in his favor for so long, Dean really should be leading a team. He really should be one of those individuals that, like, I'll tell you, I probably generate 18 to 20 personal transactions, not that I close, but that agents on my team close. And my real estate related conversations per day probably is somewhere around 0.01. Like, I don't talk to people about real estate because I'm not in production, but I have 15 to 20 people hit me up every year like, hey, we need to sell the house we bought from you 8 years ago. I'm like, oh, awesome. Jaden from my team's going to give you a call, right? And that ends up closing like 100% of the time. So again, I would be an outlier. This training is really intended for you if you are a solo practitioner that needs to up your production, or you if you're a team leader who needs to teach others how to get into production. Guys like me, Dean, Amy, like Amy probably has far less conversations per close than the average agent, but it's because she's been in the industry for 14 years and year after year after year has built up a repeat and referral business.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. This is good stuff.
Danny, I got out of production, I don't know, 14 years ago or so. I got in like 2008 or 9. I just got so burnt out that I moved into leadership and team leadership, and then into mentorship, and then into coaching. And so I've been out of production for a really long time. Like, I can't tell you the last time I showed a house to a client. But my production is done through our agents. So our team does, 700 to 1,000 units a year. And that has become my production.
It's good stuff. Well, this is a great way to start the year. Clarity is power, you guys. Make sure you know these numbers. And if you're not clear, then reach out. That's what we're here for. That's what this community is all about. So we'll be back next Monday, 9 a.m. Pacific time, 12 noon Eastern time, for another great session. Did you guys like
Who
this?
has next Monday?
Spring.
So Spring is doing next Monday. So the format we're moving to, Amy, maybe you want to explain it a little bit. Amy's going to take a week. I'm going to take a week. Spring's going to take a week. And then on off weeks, we'll probably have a special guest. Not to say that it's only me or it's only Amy or it's only Spring, but Amy's going to build her week and she's going to have guest speakers and she's going to have guest presenters, but Amy's going to own the week, or I'm going to own the week, or next week, Spring is owning the week. So I'm not sure exactly if she's training or if she's bringing on Justin or what she's doing, but next week is Spring's week.
It's going to be awesome too, because we are moving to more of a true mastermind style. And I'm sure you guys noticed that today. So we want it to be really interactive, tactical, conversational, and less where it's like, because let's be honest, guys, you can literally go to any Zoom, any webinar, any training that you want and just listen to somebody talk to you for 45 to 60 minutes. Like we've all been doing that, well, really since March of 2020, but So you can get that anywhere, and it doesn't mean that we won't have great speakers and great trainings of that nature. But we really do want Rocket Fuel to be interactive and to deliver a high level of tactical value that we've masterminded about together. So we're excited about this format. It's going to be good.
100%.
All right. Have an amazing
Okay,
Monday.
guys.
Awesome. Thanks for the feedback, Phil. We appreciate that. We'll see you guys soon. Have a great day.